I never used to believe in ghosts. Not seriously, anyway. Sure, I liked a good scary story every now and then, but I always chalked it up to overactive imaginations and drafty old houses. That changed last week. It started innocently enough. I was working late on a client project, slouched over my laptop, barely noticing the time. The apartment was dead quiet, save for the occasional clack of my keyboard and the hum of my screen. I was in that strange state between focus and fatigue when I heard it, a soft creak. It didn't register at first. I thought maybe something had shifted on my desk or the floorboards had settled, but then it came again slower this time, longer. I looked up. My bedroom door was opening. It wasn't sudden. It didn't burst open with a gust of wind or slam against the wall. It eased open like someone was slowly pushing it from the other side. I stared, waiting for footsteps or floorboard groans to follow. But nothing came. Just stillness. After a minute that felt like 10, I forced myself up. My legs were stiff. My skin prickling. I crept to the doorway, peered into the hall. Empty. Just the same dark hallway I'd walked through 100 times before. No open windows. No breeze. I convinced myself I must have left the door ajar. That would have been the end of it, just a weird, forgettable moment. But it happened again the next night. Same time. 2:17 and I know because I checked. The creak pulled me from sleep this time, slow and deliberate. I sat up in bed, heart hammering, and stared at the door as it inched open. No wind, no pets, just me wide awake and scared to death. By the third night, I knew it wasn't coincidence. I couldn't pretend anymore. Now, every night, I lie in bed and wait for it. I keep my eyes fixed on the door like I'm expecting something to come through. And in a way I am, because I know it's not just opening on its own. I know something's behind it. I just haven't seen it. Not yet. That's when I started recording. I propped my phone on my nightstand with the camera aimed at the door. I told myself I just needed to know it was real, that I wasn't losing my mind. That first night, I barely slept. I lay there, phone recording, heart pounding, staring at the door until it creaked open again. Exactly 2:17 a.m. the next morning. I watched the footage. There it was, the door, slowly creaking open, inch by inch. Nothing behind it. No shadow, no figure, no movement, but something wasn't right. I turned the volume all the way up and played it back again. That's when I heard it. A sound I hadn't noticed while it happened, maybe because it was too quiet or my fear drowned it out. But on the video, I could hear it clearly buried beneath the creak. A whisper. Too faint to make out words, but definitely a voice. Low. Like someone trying not to be heard. I played it over and over, hoping for clarity, but it stayed just out of reach. The sound of breath. Maybe a word, maybe not. But it was enough to chill me. I showed it to Marcus the next day. He's a friend, kind of a skeptic, always teasing me for my overactive imagination. I didn't expect him to believe me, but I had to try. At first, he laughed. Come on, Rachel, he said. You're really going ghost hunting in your own apartment. But as soon as I played the audio, his face changed. He leaned closer, listening. His smile faded. That's probably just static, he said. But his voice shook a little. You've been working too hard, that's all. Maybe get some sleep. But I wasn't working when it happened. I wasn't even stressed. I was lying in bed, perfectly still. I know what I heard. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat up in bed with the phone in my lap, recording, just watching the door. When 2:17 came, I was ready. The creak came, right on schedule, soft and patient, as if something was trying not to wake me. The door opened slowly until it stood halfway ajar. And then the whisper came again, louder this time, clearer. It wasn't just breath or gibberish. It was a word, leave. I felt my blood turn to ice. My mouth went dry. My limbs locked up as I stared into the dark hallway beyond the door. I wanted to get up, to slam the door shut and run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. That voice hadn't come from a dream. It hadn't come from my imagination. It had come from just outside my bedroom door. I didn't sleep at all after that. I sat curled up in bed until the sun rose, refusing to let the door out of my sight. When daylight finally flooded the room, it felt like a weight had lifted off my chest, but not completely. It never really did after that. By now, the door no longer felt like a passive oddity. It wasn't just opening anymore. It was beckoning, and something, whatever it was trying to speak. Trying to warn me, or maybe trying to claim me. The night after the voice's command, leave, I lay awake in a silence that was anything but peaceful. I couldn't shake the chill of that whispered command as I sat huddled in the darkness of my room. My mind raced, oscillating between disbelief and annoying dread that perhaps something beyond my understanding was at play. The morning light did little to bring comfort. I moved through the day in a daze, eyes ever drawn to the doorway as if it held some secret message meant only for me. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that fatigue, isolation, and a touch too many horror films had blurred the boundaries between reality and nightmare. But the evidence was undeniable. Before nightfall, I began a frantic search online, looking for clues about my apartment's history and maybe some hints of previous incidents in the building. I found little except for scattered complaints from former tenants whose accounts eerily resembled mine. One name recurred: Ethan Ward, the previous occupant who vanished without explanation. His story was scattered among old forum posts and a faded news article that I managed to download from an obscure website. It confirmed that Ethan, like me, had experienced inexplicable sounds and movements in the dead hours of the night. The final words of that article, whispering of screams and scratching sounds, sent tremors down my spine. Determined to dig deeper, I called the building manager once more. This time, I was insistent, my voice trembling as I recounted every detail. I know it sounds insane, but something is happening here. The door, it doesn't just open by itself. It whispers now, it commands, and there's more. I paused, trying to steady my fraying nerves. After a long silence, he finally replied, "Rachel, you're letting your imagination run away with you. Old buildings make noises, that's all." His dismissive tone stung more than I'd expected, as if I were being trivialized in the face of something very real. But the manager's reluctance to discuss Ethan's fate was even more unsettling. "You won't be the next," he muttered under his breath as he ended the call. Determined to trust my own experiences, I set out to capture even more evidence. I rearranged the living space to better position my camera and rigged my smartphone. With a recording app, I wanted to document everything, not just the creaks, but any anomaly, voices, shadows, even changes in temperature. As dusk settled and the day's light faded into the eerie blues of early night, I felt an almost irresistible pull to test my setup. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the same low creak jolted me from sleep. I sat upright, phone recording, heart pounding, in time with the soft, insistent rhythm of that ancient door. I watched, barely breathing, as it slowly swung open, this time revealing a sliver of darkness, far deeper than I remembered. A cold draft seeped in around the edges of the doorframe, and for an excruciating moment, I thought I saw a movement, twitch in the dark, as if something waited beyond. Then the sound of a whisper returned, clearer than before, as if someone had learned to modulate their words for maximum dread. "Leave," it repeated, the tone now laced with an urgency that bordered on menace. I almost dropped my phone, so vivid was the sudden dread. I felt my pulse in my throat, my body rigid with terror, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away from that oblivious threshold between what I knew and what I feared. After what felt like an eternity, the door halted its slow advance as though locked. In mid-motion, I listened intently, catching snatches of what might have been a murmur, a series of hasty, incomprehensible syllables. It wasn't just the word, "leave," now. There were fragmented sounds that faded into an unrecognizable language. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably, the air growing colder, damper, and every shadow taking on an almost animate quality. The next morning, with trembling fingers, I reviewed the footage. I watched frame after frame, scrutinizing every detail. There it was, a definitive sequence of the door's progression, the slow crawl of movement as if propelled by unseen hands. But in the audio, beyond the soft whisper of leave, were intermittent static bursts that seemed almost like tortured. Laughter. I couldn't decide if it was a glitch in my recording app or something far more sinister. In a desperate bid to make sense of it all, I reached out again to Marcus, hoping his rationality might offer some clarity. I had to show. You something, I stammered into the phone, my voice barely a whisper as I recounted the events of the night. He agreed to come over, promising that a second perspective might help debunk or confirm what I was experiencing. Marcus arrived later that afternoon. When he saw the footage, his usual light-hearted smirk faltered. Rachel, this is disturbing, he admitted. He rewound and replayed the video several times, eyes narrowing each time as if he were trying to read hidden messages in the static. I always thought you were exaggerating, but he hesitated, rubbing his forehead. The sound quality is off, but I can tell something's wrong. I can't explain it, but it feels deliberate. His unease did little to calm me, yet it did nothing to alleviate my terror. That evening, as twilight surrendered to the inky black of another approaching night, Marcus reluctantly agreed to spend the night. He set up camp in my living room, installing his own recording equipment. Together, we sat in silence, anticipation hanging thick between us. When the clock's digital numbers finally glowed 2:17 a.m., an almost tangible dread filled the room. My door creaked slowly open once again. This time, accompanied by a soft, almost mournful hum that resonated in the space, as if the very house were grieving. Marcus and I exchanged glances. We both knew this wasn't merely a structural quirk. In that fragile moment before the haunting crescendo of whispers and static overwhelmed our senses, I understood that the threat was no longer confined to my bedroom. It was a part of the building, a legacy of past lives and untold tragedies. And as the door swung further open, revealing nothing and yet everything, an undeniable truth took hold. The entity behind this phenomenon was more than just a figment of my restless imagination. It had made its presence known and intended to leave an indelible mark on all who dared to inhabit these haunted walls. Before words could be exchanged between Marcus and me, the haunting commenced anew, its sinister pattern set in stone. And as we sat helpless in the face of the inexplicable, it became clear that whatever was calling from the other side of that door was not merely asking. It was demanding that we face it, whether we were ready or not. Marcus left first thing in the morning. He didn't say much, just grabbed his stuff and muttered something about needing to be somewhere. I could tell by the way he avoided looking at the hallway that he wasn't okay. Whatever he had seen or heard that night had gotten to him badly. I didn't blame him. I didn't want to be here either. But I didn't have anywhere else to go. Rent wasn't cheap, and moving out on a whim wasn't an option. I tried to convince myself that maybe it would stop if I ignored it. Maybe the whisper was just a fluke. Maybe the figure I'd almost seen was a trick of my eyes. That lie lasted about 12 hours. The next night, I stayed awake again, this time out of necessity more than curiosity. I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping and waking to that sound. I left the lights on, locked the door, put a heavy chair in front of it. I was determined not to see it open again. At 2:17 a.m., it opened anyway. The creak cut through the silence like a blade. The chair scraped across the floor, pushed by an invisible hand. I sat frozen in my bed, heart slamming against my ribs. The door eased open, wider than before. It stopped halfway and then kept going. For the first time, I saw beyond the door. Not just a hallway, a figure. It stepped into the threshold, like it belonged there, as if it had always been waiting for the right moment to emerge. It was tall, hunched slightly, with limbs that felt too long to be human. Its outline shimmered like heat rising from pavement, blurry and unstable, as if reality couldn't fully contain it. And God, its face wasn't a face at all. Just a mask of pale skin stretched over something that didn't quite get beneath. The eyes were hollow, sunken pits, wide and unblinking. The mouth was open, not moving, not breathing, just open, like it was waiting for something to crawl out. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. My entire body was gripped by something beyond fear, something ancient, primal. The figure didn't walk forward. It didn't need to. The room seemed to bend around it, drawing it inward like the walls wanted to swallow me whole. And then the whispers returned. But they weren't whispers anymore. They were voices, dozens of them, hundreds, maybe. All overlapping, all urgent, all incomprehensible, except for one, louder than the rest, cutting through the storm like a knife. You shouldn't be here. The voice didn't come from the thing. It didn't come from the room. It came from everywhere, the walls, the air, the floor under my feet. It pressed against my chest like a weight, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. My head throbbed. The figure tilted its head. The gesture was almost human, but wrong, too fluid, too curious, like it was mimicking what it thought people did. Its open mouth twitched, and suddenly the voices grew deafening. I clutched my ears, curled up on the bed, and squeezed my eyes shut, but it didn't help. The sounds weren't just around me, they were inside me, in my head, my bones, my blood. And just like that, it stopped. The figure was gone. The room was quiet. The only sound left was my own ragged breathing, the thump of my heartbeat slowing in my ears. The door stood wide open, still and unmoving, like nothing had happened. But it had. Something had come through. Not just through the door, but through the veil between sanity and something else. Something older. Something watching. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Not after that. When morning finally bled into the room, the world outside looked the same, but I wasn't. Something had changed. I knew now that I wasn't just being haunted. I was being watched, tested. It was like the thing behind the door had been trying to figure me out, see how far it could go before I broke. I needed answers. I went back online and dug deeper into Ethan Ward. I found a single news article from 10 years ago, buried in some digital archive. Local man reported missing after bizarre complaints. It described how Ethan had called the police multiple times in the weeks before his disappearance, rambling about voices and figures in his hallway. He had told friends and neighbors that something was trying to get through to him, something not human. He vanished without trace, left his phone charging, clothes still in the closet, food rotting on the counter. And then came the detail that made my stomach twist into knots. The last time anyone heard from him was 2:17 a.m. His final voicemail to a friend contained only a single word, barely audible beneath a sea of static. Leave. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands trembling. The walls of the apartment felt closer now. Thicker, heavier, like they were pressing in on me. I glanced at the clock. 10:47 p.m., less than 4 hours, until the door would open again. I grabbed a bag and threw whatever I could into it. Laptop, charger, clothes, wallet. I didn't care about the rest. I just needed to go. Anywhere but here. But as I zipped the bag shut, I heard it. Not the creak this time, not the whisper. A tap. 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 It came from the door. Slow. Measured. Like knuckles rapping gently against the wood. I backed away, heart thundering. The tapping continued, steady and deliberate. Then it stopped. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the bag, unlocked my front door, and bolted into the hallway without looking back. My footsteps echoed down the corridor, each one faster than the last, until I burst through the building's front doors into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I reached the street. But even as I stood there, panting, the weight of something unseen still clung to me. I turned around, drawn by instinct, and looked up. There, in the window of my apartment, the light of my nightstand clock glowed faintly through the blinds. 2:17 a.m., and for just a second, I thought I saw it again. A shadow, shifting behind the glass, watching me. I didn't stop moving for blocks. I don't remember turning corners or crossing streets. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out beneath me. When I finally slowed down, I was standing outside a cheap, rundown motel with flickering neon lights and a vacancy sign that buzzed like it was straining to stay alive. I didn't care about the condition. I just needed a lock between me and that door. The front desk clerk barely looked up as I handed over cash and took a key. The room was as grimy as I expected, musty carpet, yellowed lamplight, cracked tile in the bathroom. But it was far away from that apartment, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I might be safe. I set my bag down by the bed and collapsed onto the mattress, my hands still trembling. I didn't even take off my shoes. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, heart still thudding in my ears. At some point, exhaustion overtook fear. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. Creak. One sound. That was all it took to turn my blood to ice. I sat up, breath hitching in my throat. Creak. I turned my head slowly toward the motel door. It was cracked open. Not all the way, just slightly. Just enough for a sliver of darkness to spill in from the hallway outside. Creak. It opened wider. No, I whispered. Not here. Not again. I scrambled off the bed, grabbing my phone, backing into the farthest corner of the room. My fingers trembled as I fumbled to dial Marcus's number. He answered gradually, his voice slurred with sleep. Rachel? What time is it? It followed me. My voice cracked. Marcus, it followed me. I left the apartment. I ran. I'm in a motel, but it's here. It opened the door. A pause on the other end. Then you're not making sense. It's the same thing. The creaking, the door, it's happening right now. Another pause. This one longer. The silence stretched, and then Marcus said something that made my heart stop. Rachel, what are you talking about? You're still at your apartment. I stopped breathing. No, I whispered. No, I left. I ran. I'm not there. The door to the motel room now stood completely open, revealing an empty hallway. And yet, I felt it. That same pressure. That same heavy presence I'd come to dread. I clutched the phone tighter, shaking my head like I could somehow shake. Off the wrongness. But Marcus's voice didn't go away. In fact, it grew more distant, as though he were being pulled away from the phone. Or I was... Rachel? He said again, but the voice was fading. Warping. You need to wake up. The whispers started again. Soft at first. Far away. Then rising, closing in like a tide. I dropped the phone. The room began to twist around. Me. The walls stretched, contorted. Shadows spilled across the floor, curling like smoke. My vision swam, the air thickening until I could barely draw breath. I backed into the corner, eyes wide, body trembling. The whispers grew louder. A hurricane of voices. Some screamed, some chanted, others simply wept. And then, cutting through them all, the same voice as before. You can't leave. The room snapped like a rubber band, folding inward on itself. Everything, the bed, the walls, the light collapsed into darkness. A darkness so absolute it felt physical, like being buried alive in shadow, and then silence, nothingness. When I came to, I was back in my apartment. In bed, the sheets twisted around me, damp with sweat. My bag was gone. The clothes I'd packed, an hotel key gone. My phone was on a nightstand, screen dark. I sat up slowly, breath catching in my throat. The room was quiet, but it wasn't right. The light was dimmer. The air was colder, and the clock, the digital clock I used to watch every night, its screen was blank, dead, the numbers frozen in place. 2:17 a.m. The time hadn't changed. It never changed. It was as if I had never left. Like the motel, the escape, the phone call, it was all some kind of trick, a loop, a trap. Something had pulled me back. Something stronger than logic, stronger than fear. Something ancient, persistent, hungry. I rose from the bed slowly, dizzy, disoriented. My feet hit the floor with a soft thud that echoed louder than it should have. I walked toward the door. It was closed now, completely. No sign it had ever opened. I reached for the handle, paused. My hand hovered an inch from the knob, my breath hitching. I wanted to leave, more than anything. But a part of me, something deep, instinctual, knew that it wouldn't matter. That I could run all night, all month, all year, and it would still find me. The door wasn't just a physical object anymore. It wasn't just part of my apartment. It was part of me now. It lived with me, inside me. I stepped back, chest heaving. My back hit the wall, and I slid down, pulling my knees to my chest. The air felt thicker. Time moved slower. I stayed there until dawn, eyes locked on the door, waiting, because even though it was shut now, I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. By the time morning came, I wasn't sure if I'd slept at all or if I ever really had. I didn't feel human anymore, just a husk, a vessel for fear, but I couldn't go on like this. I needed answers, real answers, not just from Marcus, not from the landlord who clearly knew more than he was saying. I needed the truth, buried somewhere beneath decades of neglect and silence. So I did what I should have done from the start. I started digging into the building's history. It took hours. I scoured public records, scraped through old forums, newspaper archives, anything with a hint of relevance. I even reached out to a local historical society. Most of what I found was mundane. The structure had been built in 1926, converted into apartments in the 80s, minor renovations over the years. But then I stumbled across a thread on a forgotten message board, mostly conspiracy nuts and amateur. Ghost hunters. And buried among the rants about cursed land and ley lines was a name. Ethan Ward. The post was short, just a scanned newspaper clipping from a decade ago. Local man reported missing after bizarre complaints. I clicked it, heart pounding. It described Ethan's disappearance with uncomfortable detail. His complaints about late-night disturbances, strange whispers, the sensation of being watched. It was like reading my own journal. He'd left dozens of voicemails to friends, growing increasingly frantic, paranoid, broken. Until one night, he vanished, left behind his phone, wallet, even his shoes. Police found no signs of struggle. Just a faint, burnt smell in the hallway and long, thin scratch marks on the inside of the bedroom door. That bedroom. My bedroom. The last line of the article hit me like a brick. Neighbors reported hearing muffled screams and frantic scratching from inside Ward's unit at approximately 2:17 a.m. The case remains unsolved. My vision blurred. The scratches. The smell. The time. The screams. It wasn't just a haunting. It was a pattern, a cycle. I backed away from my screen, bile rising in my throat. What if Ethan hadn't just disappeared? What if he never left? The whispering, the figure, the distortion of time and space? What if the apartment, that room, was some kind of threshold, a door in itself? And what if I was next? I paced the apartment like a prisoner, eyes constantly flicking to the hallway, waiting for the door to creak again. I wanted to run, but where would I go? I'd already tried that. I couldn't even be sure that leaving meant anything anymore. This wasn't bound to geography, it was bound to me. But still I packed. Out of desperation, hope, denial, I tossed clothes into a suitcase. With shaking hands. My laptop, chargers, toothbrush. Didn't matter. I just needed to go. As if motion would free me from this spiral. That's when I heard it again. Not the creak. Not the whispers. A tap. Soft. Measured. Rhythmic. Tap. 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 Coming from the wall. I froze. It was behind me. The wall directly across from the foot of my bed. No doors, no vents, no pipes, just drywall. Tap. Tap. It was like someone was inside the wall. Waiting. Listening. I stepped closer. Each footfall heavier than the last. Who's there? I whispered. Silence. And then tap, 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 to a frantic burst, like nails or knuckles hammering with wild desperation. The entire wall shuddered. I stumbled back, heart threatening to explode. I grabbed my bag, bolted to the front door, yanked it open, and stopped dead. A single note was lying on the floor. Just a torn scrap of lined paper placed precisely in front of my apartment. I bent down, fingers trembling, and picked it up. 2 words scrawled in uneven handwriting. Too late. I slammed the door and backed away, the paper falling from my hand. This thing, it was toying with me, testing how far it could push before I broke. Ethan had lasted 6 months. I was already unraveling in weeks. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. I answered, barely able to get words out. It knows I'm trying to leave. It's getting worse. It left me a message. A note. It's inside the walls now, Marcus. Rachel, calm down. Where are you right now? I'm in my apartment. There was a long pause. I thought you said you left. I tried. I snapped. I thought I did, but I didn't. I woke up back here, like it dragged me back. Rachel. His voice was thin now, distant. What's the last thing you remember doing today? What are you talking about? I've been trying to call you since yesterday. You stopped replying. You didn't pick up. I came by earlier to check. Your apartment was locked. Lights off. No sound. No, that's not possible. I've been awake. I've been researching. No, Marcus whispered. Rachel, you haven't left the apartment in 3 days. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. 3 days? No, that was impossible. I had gone outside. I'd walked. I'd felt the cold air. I'd stood in the street and stared up at the window, hadn't I? I looked around the room. The same blanket still twisted at the foot of my bed. The same coffee cup sat cold on the nightstand. The clock? Still frozen. 2:17 a.m. It was like time had stopped in this place. Like the room existed in a loop, playing over the same moments until something inside me cracked. I stared at the door. Closed. Silent. Waiting. Marcus was still speaking, his voice growing fainter. You need to get out. Whatever it is, it's anchored to that room. You need to. But the call cut off. My screen went black. No signal. Nothing. Just me. And the door, I didn't try calling Marcus back. What was the point? No matter how far the voices reached, no matter how hard I tried to claw my way out of this nightmare, everything came back to the same place. The door. Always the door. And the time, 2:17 a.m. time, had become irrelevant. The outside world barely felt real anymore. All I knew was the soft creak of old hinges, the whisper of unseen voices, and the overwhelming certainty that I was being watched. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't pack. I didn't record anything. I sat on the floor, back pressed to the cold wall opposite the door, knees pulled to my chest, flashlight in one hand, a kitchen knife in the other. Waiting. 2:17 a.m. The door creaked open. This time, there was no slow buildup, no dramatic tension. It swung wide in a single, smooth motion, confident, intentional, and something stepped through. The figure was taller than I remembered. Its form no longer shimmered like heat, but staggered, twitching like corrupted video footage. Each limb moved out of sync, its motions fragmented, like it was being pieced together moment by moment. A blur of wrongness? It didn't need eyes to see me. It knew where I was. The whispers returned like a chorus of teeth grinding against glass, but now they weren't speaking in fragments. Now they spoke in unison. Come closer. I didn't move. The flashlight in my hand flickered once, then died. Darkness swallowed the room. My breath caught as the temperature dropped suddenly, frost blooming along the walls and across the surface of my nightstand. My skin prickled with a sensation like thousands of invisible pins stabbing into me. The voices came closer, not with sound, but with weight. I felt them inside me, behind my eyes, under my skin, crawling through my thoughts like insects nesting in my brain. The figure spoke again, but this time it was my voice, Rachel. I screamed not out of fear, but out of revolt. I lunged. Forward knife raised, but the moment I moved, the room folded, walls twisted, the floor bent upward. Space turned in on itself. I was falling, but not into blackness, into the room again. Same walls, same door, same clock on the nightstand. 2:17 a.m., the door was closed. Everything looked untouched, except it wasn't. I was still gripping the knife. My breath still steamed in the freezing air. My flashlight, long dead, lay cracked beside me. I had gone nowhere. Or I had gone everywhere, and the room had pulled me back again. I was the new tenant, the next name. The next entry in a story no one believed until it was too late. In the following days, if days even existed anymore, I tried everything. I boarded the door shut. It still opened. I broke the clock. Its shattered face still glowed. I screamed. No one heard. I even tried cutting into the walls where the tapping came from. All I found inside was black. Not darkness, black. Like the wall didn't contain anything. Just void. One night, if that word still means anything, I stared at the camera footage from earlier recordings. I don't know why I checked. Maybe to ground myself? Maybe to see proof that what I remembered really happened. But when I played the video, it showed something new. It showed me sleeping every night, peacefully. No flinching, no whispering, no screaming. Just me, lying still, undisturbed. And then at 2:17 a.m., the door opened and something walked out. Not in, out. Something left the room, wearing my face. I don't know what I am anymore. I'm still here in the apartment, I think. But the clock hasn't moved in days. The windows show nothing but static gray light. Now I can't open the front door. Not that I think anything is anymore. Whatever walked out that night, it took my place. I'm what's left behind. The door still opens. Every night, I no longer fear it. No, I listen. And I whisper back, because I know someone else will move in soon. The cycle will begin again. The door will creak open, and I'll be waiting. Just like Ethan. Just like the others. Tell me when your door opens at 2:17 a.m., what will you do? It started the way most horror stories never do, with breakfast. The morning had been quiet, almost too quiet for a Tuesday. I made my usual coffee, toasted 2 slices of bread, and sat at my small kitchen table scrolling through emails still. Half asleep. The air was calm, the kind of stillness you only notice when something is off, like the world was holding its breath. It wasn't until I stood to rinse out my mug that I noticed it. There, hanging on the wall next to the refrigerator, was my monthly calendar. Same one I'd been using all year. A plain white square with boxes and dates. I usually jotted down meetings and reminders in blue or black pen. But today, one of the boxes looked wrong. The message was written in deep red ink, jagged and erratic. The handwriting sharp like the tip of a blade had done the writing. Don't leave the apartment. I stared at the words for a long time, blinking to make sure I wasn't imagining. Them, I hadn't written that. I never used red ink. I didn't even own a red pen. And yet there it was, as real as my half-eaten toast on the counter. A chill ran down my spine. My first thought, of course, was that it had to be a prank. Maybe. One of my friends had broken in, somehow snuck the message in to spook me. It seemed ridiculous, but it was better than the alternative. After all, I lived alone. No roommates, no spare key given out. The apartment door had 3 locks, all of which I checked religiously every night. Still, the handwriting wasn't mine, not even close. Mine is neat, rounded, almost too careful. This was jagged, almost angry. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the unease curling in my stomach. Maybe I wrote it myself, half asleep during a midnight anxiety spiral. Maybe it was a leftover from the previous tenant that I'd only just noticed. I tried to make the idea believable, even though I knew deep down it didn't fit. I pulled my phone from my pocket, snapped a picture of the calendar, then erased. The message with a damp cloth. The red smeared like blood, staining my fingers faintly before finally coming off. Done, I muttered under my breath. Gone. But the unease didn't leave with it. I couldn't focus on work that day. I sat at my desk in the corner of the apartment, trying to write emails, but my eyes kept drifting back to the calendar. The space where the red message had been felt. Louder, somehow, like it still held weight, like it was waiting for something. By afternoon, I gave up pretending to be productive. I paced the apartment, checking the locks again. Bolted, deadbolt, chain, all locked. The windows were latched. The curtains drawn. I even opened every closet, every cabinet, as if some red ink gremlin might be hiding inside. Nothing. The apartment was exactly as it should be. Too perfect, too still. By the time evening came, I was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. Like my brain had been sprinting all day. I didn't eat much for dinner. Just microwaved some leftovers and sat in front of the TV, pretending. That static-filled sitcom reruns were enough to distract me from that knowing presence I couldn't explain. When I went to bed, I left the hallway light on. I hadn't done that in years. I woke to sunlight slipping between the blinds, casting long slats of gold across the floor. A new day. A fresh start. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and shuffled into the kitchen, determined to shake off the weirdness of the day before. But when I poured my coffee and turned around, my gaze was pulled like a magnet to the calendar again. There was another message. Something is watching you. I nearly dropped the mug. The red ink was back, darker than before. The letters were more erratic now, uneven and trembling, like they'd been written in a hurry, like whatever had written them had been terrified. And this time, I didn't laugh. I didn't rationalize. The fear struck immediately fast and sharp. My apartment had been locked. No signs of entry. I hadn't heard a sound all night. And yet, someone had been here. Someone was trying to tell me something, or warn me. I stared at the words, a tightness building in my chest. They almost seemed to move as I read them, the red pulsing against the paper like it was still fresh, but I didn't go near it. I just stood there, heart pounding, coffee forgotten, as a heavy silence settled over the room. Then, from the kitchen, the coffee maker beeped. A single chime, innocent, harmless, but it felt like a gunshot. I flinched so hard I nearly spilled the coffee on my shirt. I turned, eyes scanning the windows. The blinds hadn't moved. The door was still bolted shut, but I couldn't shake the feeling like something was hiding just beyond the walls. Watching, waiting. I stood motionless for what felt like forever. Then, finally, I forced myself to move, to sit at the table and take a few calming breaths. I told myself it was stress, that maybe I'd been sleepwalking. I told myself a lot of things, but none of it mattered. Because deep down, I knew the calendar was going to keep writing back. And I was going to keep reading. I didn't leave the apartment all day. Not because of the message, at least. That's what I told myself. But I knew that wasn't true. The warning burned in my mind like a neon sign. Something is watching you. I erased it by mid-morning, just like the first one. But this time, the red ink didn't smear the same way. It stuck to the paper longer, like dried blood refusing to let go. My fingertips turned pink again, and the stain lingered under my nails like a mark I couldn't scrub away. I kept glancing over my shoulder, checking the hallway, the windows, the door. My apartment wasn't large, just a studio with a bathroom off the side and a tiny galley kitchen, but suddenly it felt like a maze. Like there were corners that hadn't been there before, shadows deeper than they used to be. Every sound made me flinch. A distant car horn, the faint creak of the ceiling fan. Even the refrigerator cycling sent a shiver through my spine. At noon, I turned off my work laptop. There was no point. I couldn't concentrate with that feeling wrapping itself around me, tight and suffocating. I sat at the kitchen table instead, phone in hand, debating whether to call someone. Maybe Marcus. Maybe my landlord. But what would I even say? Hey, weird question, but is my apartment haunted? Also, my calendar is writing to me. They think I lost my mind. Maybe I had. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I pulled the calendar off the wall. I flipped to previous months, looking for more messages, anything I might have missed. Every page was clean. Just dentist appointments, grocery reminders, and scribbled notes about meetings. Nothing in red. Nothing wrong. Only this month. Only now. I set it down on the table and stared at it, daring it to move. My heart raced with every second, but it didn't change. Not yet. By the time the sun dipped behind the city skyline, my nerves were frayed down to splinters. I turned on every light in the apartment. The glow made me feel safer, but only barely. Shadows still gathered in the corners, unmoved by my fluorescent bravado. I tried to convince myself it would all be over by morning. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't going away. I barely slept that night. My eyes refused to close for more than a few seconds before they'd fly open again, darting around the darkened room. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift in the building made me clutch my blanket tighter. Around 3 a.m., I thought I saw something move in the hallway. Just a flicker. A silhouette. I told myself it was nothing. Sleep deprivation. Paranoia. But I still didn't move until the sun came up. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and immediately stopped cold. There was another message. Look under the sink. The words were printed larger than before. Bold, sharp strokes as if someone had carved them into the page. The red ink still looked wet, gleaming faintly in the morning light. I didn't move. I couldn't. The message wasn't like the others. This wasn't a warning. It was a command, and I didn't want to know what was under there. I stood there for what felt like an hour, frozen, every bone in my body resisting the pull of those 5 words. The calendar seemed to hum with energy, vibrating with some invisible presence that wanted me to obey. Look under the sink. I whispered the words aloud without meaning to. I took a shaky step toward the kitchen cabinet. My hand hovered over the handle. Then I backed away again, turning in a tight circle like I could escape the pressure of the room by spinning in place. But it didn't work. The command remained. Eventually I gave in. I dropped to my knees, pulled the cabinet open, and peered. Inside, cleaning supplies, a bottle of bleach, a roll of garbage bags, a sponge that had gone stiff with age, and then something else. Tucked in the back, behind the cleaning spray, was a small rectangular shape wrapped in brown paper. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't put that there. I reached in slowly, fingers brushing the package. It felt damp and cold, like it had been waiting a long time. I brought it out and peeled the paper away. Inside was a photograph. A photo of me sitting at my desk, bent over my laptop, head down. Focused. The image was dark, slightly blurry, taken from a low angle through a crack in the door. My hands shook as I stared at it. I had never seen this photo before. I didn't even have a camera in the apartment. I looked at the timestamp in the corner, printed in tiny red digits. It was from 2 nights ago. The night after the first message. My legs gave out and I sank to the floor. Someone had been inside, watching me. Close enough to take a photo, without waking me. The worst part, I hadn't noticed a thing. I crawled to my feet and stumbled backward until I hit the fridge. I slid down and sat there, knees pulled to my chest, the photograph trembling in my hand. I didn't want to look at the calendar again, but I did. Another message had appeared. Stop digging. The letters were rushed, angry, as if I'd broken a rule, as if I'd gotten too close. I didn't remember falling asleep. But when I woke up, I was still on the kitchen floor, the photo clenched tight in my fist. My neck ached. My head pounded. I blinked up at the dull yellow light overhead, and for a brief moment, I thought it might have all been a dream. Then I looked at the calendar, stopped digging. Still there. Red. Row. Real. I forced myself to my feet, bones creaking like the floor beneath me. I didn't know what time it was, and I didn't care. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. Just go. Get out of the apartment. But when I glanced at the front door, something inside me pulled back like if I touched that knob, the walls would shift and swallow me whole. I couldn't explain it, but the apartment, it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like something else was living here with me. Something older, smarter, and cruel. I spent the next few hours in a fog, pacing, checking behind curtains, pulling open drawers, not even sure what I was looking for. Cameras? A journal? A trapdoor? Something to give this nightmare context. But there was nothing. The apartment was exactly the same, yet completely different. Every corner, every crevice, hummed with pressure like I was being watched, not just by one presence, but by the walls themselves. Eventually, I picked up the photo again. I turned it over, desperate for some clue, but the back was blank. Then I noticed something I hadn't before, a dark smudge near the bottom of the image. I held it up closer. It was a reflection barely visible. In the corner of the photo, just beside my shoulder in the screen's glare, was a warped shape. A figure. It was distorted, but it looked tall, thin, head slightly tilted. No features, just a long shadow watching from behind the crack in my door. I dropped the photo like it burned me. My knees hit the floor again. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Something had been inside the apartment, with me while I worked, not just watching, lurking. I don't know what pushed me to do it, but I grabbed my laptop and typed apartment 4C history into a search engine. I didn't expect much. Maybe an old listing, maybe nothing at all. But there it was, buried deep in the search results. A local newspaper article dated nearly 11 years ago. Tenant disappearance tied to apartment 4C. I clicked it with trembling fingers. The article was short. No images, just a few lines of unsettling information. A woman named Dana Ellis, 28, vanished without a trace. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. Her apartment was found locked from the inside. Neighbors reported hearing her scream around midnight, but by the time authorities arrived, she was gone. The only thing left behind was a series of strange calendar entries in red ink. The last message simply read, "You should have stopped." I read the line again and again, my stomach twisting tighter with each repetition. The exact same handwriting, the same pattern, the same warnings. And she was gone, just gone. I pushed back from the laptop so hard the chair toppled behind me. I staggered to my feet, breathing hard. The photo, the messages, the commands. It was all part of something bigger, some cycle I'd fallen into, without realizing. And now I was in it. Just like Dana, I thought about calling the police. Maybe they'd find something. Maybe they'd believe me. But I already knew how that would go. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints but mine. I'd sound crazy. Worse, I'd look crazy. And they'd leave, just like they must have done 11 years ago. So I grabbed my phone and did the only thing I could think of. I called Marcus. It rang 3 times before he answered. "Rachel?" His voice was groggy. "You okay?" It's not even 7. "Marcus?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "Someone's been in my apartment. I found a photo of me from inside, and there are messages on my calendar and red ink. I think I'm being watched." A pause, a long one. "Rachel," he said slowly, "you need to calm down, okay? Maybe you've just been working too hard. You're scaring me." "I'm not crazy, Marcus," I snapped. "I have proof. There's a woman who used to live here. She went missing. Just like this." She was writing about it. I found the article. Another pause, then softer. "I'm coming over." "No," I said quickly. "I don't think you should. Something's wrong with this place. It doesn't want anyone else here." I heard him shift on the other end of the call. "What do you mean it?" I opened my mouth to answer. Then the calendar chimed. Not a sound, a feeling. I turned. A new message had appeared, still fresh and wet. "He won't help you." My phone dropped from my hands. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. The red letters seemed to pulse like veins across the page. I stared at the message, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't yet. Hatred. It wasn't just warning me anymore. It was threatening me, targeting me, punishing me. The room went still. My ears rang with silence. Like the apartment itself had inhaled and was waiting to exhale something awful. I backed toward the bathroom, shut the door behind me, and locked it. Then I sank to the floor with my back against the tub, shaking uncontrollably. The calendar was on the other side of the wall, still dripping ink, still alive. And I knew this wasn't just some haunted object. It was the beginning of something worse. Something that didn't want to be discovered. I didn't leave the bathroom until the sun started creeping through the cracks in the blinds. Even then, I waited frozen, listening for anything beyond the door. I heard nothing. But silence no longer meant safety. Silence had weight now. Presence. Eventually, I stood, legs numb from being curled against cold porcelain all night. I cracked the bathroom door and peeked into the apartment. It looked unchanged. The kitchen was empty. The blinds were still drawn. The calendar still hung on the wall, but I could feel it. Something had shifted, like the air had been exhaled. The message was still there. He won't help you. The red ink had dried, but the letters seemed to blister off the page, sharp and angry. I tore it from the wall in a sudden surge of panic. I crumpled it in my hands and threw it across the room. I expected relief. Instead, my vision blurred. Not from tears, something else. A pressure thick and suffocating coiled behind my eyes. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Wrong move, a voice seemed to whisper, not aloud, but behind my thoughts. Like a scolding, like the apartment was disappointed in me. I needed to know what I was up against. I retrieved the crumpled paper, flattening it on the table. The ink hadn't smeared. Of course it hadn't. I opened my laptop again, pulled up the article about Dana Ellis, and reread it this time looking for something I missed. There wasn't much. The investigation had gone nowhere. No suspects. No clues. The police had chalked it up to mental health complications. The usual shrug. But there was one line buried in the middle. Dana contacted the building's prior owner several times in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, complaining of messages from nowhere and a presence in the apartment that grows angry. When she doesn't listen, I copied the name of the old owner, Gerald B. Rinnick, and searched him. And to my shock, I found something. Not just real estate documents. A blog, long dormant. Last post, 2012, but still online. I clicked. It was plain, barely styled, like something from the early internet. But the first post caught my eye immediately. Some doors in this building were never meant to be opened again. My mouth went dry. I read everything he wrote. It started years ago, before Dana, before even the tenant before her. Gerald inherited the building from a distant uncle. He was planning to renovate it and rent out the units. But as he wrote, Torsi was always wrong. People complained about noises, about cold spots, whispers. One tenant left after a week, abandoning all their belongings. Then things escalated. One entry stood out. A woman named Lorraine, in the 1980s, reported that her mirror kept fogging up with words written backwards, in red. Messages, warnings, Gerald wrote. She said it wasn't ink. It was blood. She vanished too. The only trace left behind? A calendar, covered in messages. Gerald stopped leasing the apartment for almost 5 years after that. He boarded it up, called it cursed. But eventually financial pressure made him reopen it. Maybe it's the room, he wrote. Maybe it's the building. Or maybe it's not a haunting at all. Maybe it's something older. Oh, Will, I leaned closer. The calendar doesn't just warn, it demands. And if you ignore it, it takes. I stared at those words for a long time. It takes, like Dana, like Lorraine. Was I next? I rushed to search the rest of the building history. Deaths, suicides, missing persons. It was all there, buried in unrelated headlines, spread out over decades. But always in apartment 4C, and always with the same signs. Sudden paranoia, strange messages, calendar references, whispering dot all before the disappearances. I sat back in my chair, stunned. This wasn't a haunting, this was a pattern, a ritual. It had happened before, and it was happening again. To me, the sound of paper, rustling snapped my head around. I turned toward the table. The calendar, despite being crumpled and torn, was now flat and pristine again. Hanging from its hook. Impossible. I stepped toward it slowly, dread thudding in my chest like a second heartbeat. The page had turned to the next day, and written across the square in massive red letters, "Tonight." I backed away until I hit the wall. No more guessing. No more researching. No more waiting for it to come to me. I grabbed my coat and phone. I was done with this apartment. I didn't care what the calendar wanted. I was leaving. But as I reached for the doorknob, I paused. There was something else on the door, a mark etched into the wood just beneath the peephole. I leaned in, heart pounding. It was the same symbol from Gerald's blog, crudely drawn, like an eye with too many lashes, or a sun with crooked rays. Pete called it the mark of the taken. I hadn't seen it there before. But it was carved deep, ancient, permanent, waiting for my hand to touch the knob, waiting for me to choose wrong. I pulled my hand back. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped, heart nearly seizing. It was a text from Marcus. "Did you sleep okay? Want me to bring lunch?" So normal, so innocent. Like the world outside was still turning. Like I wasn't a prisoner in something's game. I didn't reply. I just turned back toward the calendar. It had changed again. "You're out of time." The moment I saw it, "You're out of time," I knew I wouldn't survive the night if I stayed. But leaving wasn't an option either. The symbol on the door. It was like a seal, not just a warning. A boundary. Something had claimed this space. And stepping out without permission felt like peeling off my own skin. I backed away. The apartment had grown darker without the sun fully setting. The shadows stretched longer than they should. Corners that had always been empty now looked deeper, thicker. I didn't know what time it was, but I could feel the hour drawing near. The calendar was no longer a thing on the wall. It was the wall. It pulsed, it watched, and it was waiting. I turned every light on in the apartment. Kitchen, bathroom, hallway, even the dim overhead bulb in the closet. But the brightness felt useless. The light didn't reach anymore. It just illuminated. How wrong everything had become. I could hear it now, too. Not voices dash breathing, not my own. Something else. Shallow. Rhythmic. As if it were standing behind the drywall. Lungs pressing against the plaster. I tried texting Marcus again. "Don't come over." No matter what. He didn't reply. My fingers hovered, about to send another message when a low creak echoed from the bedroom. I froze. The calendar rustled. Another message. New, still wet. "Go to bed. No way." I wasn't going anywhere near that room, but even as I backed away, the light above me flickered. Then the hallway bulb popped, glass raining down onto the hardwood. Darkness bled from the corridor like ink, spilling toward me. Go to bed. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. I stood at the threshold of my bedroom like I was standing on the edge of a grave. Everything inside was dim, even with the lamp on. The bed looked the same, the covers slightly askew, the pillow dented, but the air, it was thicker. Like breathing through water. I stepped inside, 1 foot at a time. Each step felt like walking into a shrinking room. My phone slipped in my sweaty palm as I sat on the bed. I didn't pull the covers over me. I didn't turn the lamp off. But I lay down and waited. The clock on my phone read 11:57, 3 minutes. The longest 3 minutes of my life. I clutched the phone like a talisman, but the screen flickered once, twice, and then shut off completely. Dead. No battery warning. Nothing. The apartment held its breath. Then the calendar spoke again, not in writing, in sound. I heard the pages fluttering furiously in the other room, like a hurricane of paper tearing through the kitchen. The light bulb in my bedroom dimmed to a sickly orange glow. Then I heard the breathing again. Closer now. Much closer. 11:59. I sat up. My body wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't know if I should stay in the bed like it told me or run, scream, fight anything. But some part of me already knew. I was long past choices. I had already disobeyed too many times. I had dug too deep, read too much, resisted too often, and now Now it was coming to collect. Midnight. Everything stopped. The light went out. I was blind, and then a creak. The unmistakable groan of my bedroom door, even though it was already open. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. A presence stepping over the threshold. Heavy, slow, dragging something behind it. Something wet. Then came the voice. Not a whisper, a chorus. Layered and deep and broken. You were warned, I gasped. Tried to scream. But no sound came out. The presence stepped closer. I could feel it behind the veil of darkness watching me. Something brushed the side of the bed. Then something climbed onto it. The weight was immense, like the mattress was being crushed under centuries of rot and hate. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The voice came again, now inches from my face. Sleep now. Then darkness absolute. I don't remember anything after that. No dreams, no visions. Just an abyss. When I opened my eyes again, daylight poured through the blinds. The bed was empty. The lights were on again. My phone was on the nightstand, fully charged. And the calendar, back to normal. No messages, no blood red ink. Just clean white boxes and dates. Like nothing had ever happened. For a moment, I dared to believe it was over. That maybe I had survived whatever ritual I had stumbled into. But as I stepped into the living room, the illusion shattered. The air was wrong again. Still. Expectant. Then I noticed something on the wall beside the calendar. A single long scratch etched deep into the drywall. Like something with claws had marked its territory. I sat down at the table, unable to shake. The emptiness inside me, I didn't feel like me anymore. I felt vacated, marked. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You stayed? Good. We can begin. My hand went cold. I looked up and watched helpless as the calendar turned its own page. I stared at the calendar as it turned itself. No breeze, no hand, just will. The thick page flipped over, landing with a hollow slap that echoed like a gunshot through the apartment. Today's date was blank, for the first time in a week. There was no red ink, no message, no warning, no command, and that absence was worse than anything else. Because it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like silence before something breaks. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave. But after last night, I knew this place didn't follow rules. The door didn't protect me. The walls didn't separate me from it. I wasn't just being haunted anymore. I was being claimed. The text still sat on my phone, unread but burned into my mind. You stayed. Good. We can begin. Begin what? I opened the phone again, trying to trace the number, hoping it would give me something to hold on to. But it wasn't even a real number. Just a blank sender. No call history. No contact info. I tried replying anyway. What do you want? The message sent, but I already knew. The reply came instantly. You know us? You just forgot. The phone vibrated again. Look in the mirror. I didn't want to, but my legs moved anyway. Like they belonged to someone else? I walked into the bathroom, hands numb, and turned on the light. At first, everything looked normal. Just my tired face, pale and hollow-eyed, staring back from the glass. Then I leaned closer and saw it. A faint smear of red ink beneath the surface, like it had seeped into the mirror itself. It wasn't on my skin. It was inside the reflection, stretching along my jaw, crawling up toward my temple. A mark, a line, a symbol, the same one carved into the door. I stumbled back, and that's when the mirror blinked. Not me, my reflection. It blinked out of sync with me. And then it smiled. I slammed the bathroom door shut, breathing hard. This was real. It had been real all along. I had followed every breadcrumb, ignored every warning, and now the truth was slithering into view. The calendar wasn't just showing me things. It was rewriting me. I opened my laptop again, desperately scrolling through Gerald Rennick's old blog. There were only a few posts. I hadn't read entries so jumbled they barely made sense. Half-corrupted files, garbled symbols. But one Of them loaded. It was dated almost 30 years ago. The title, it always chooses one. The apartment is the gate, not the prison. It doesn't need the building. It needs the person. The awareness, the observer. It chooses one to be its vessel. Not to kill, not to haunt, to continue. That's why the calendar writes. It's not just warning you. It's training you, conditioning you, getting you used to obeying, getting you used to being watched until you become part of it. The last line of the blog made my blood freeze. If you're reading this and still living in 4C, it's already inside you. I slammed the laptop shut and threw it across the room. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't even find the breath. Because deep down I'd known it. Since the first day, I ignored the warning. Since I found the photograph. Since I heard the voices say, "You didn't stop." This was never about scaring me. It was about turning me into it, and the final step, obedience. That's when I heard the calendar rustling again. I turned slowly and saw one final message appear, this time not in a square, not on a date. It stretched across the entire bottom of the calendar, bleeding over the paper like a wound. Right the next one. My knees gave out. I collapsed onto the floor, mouth open, lungs trembling, staring at the message as it pulsed, almost alive. Right the next one. That's what happened to Dana. That's what happened to Lorraine. And Ethan, and everyone else before me. It didn't just take them. It replaced them. And now, I understood my role. I was the calendar now. The hand. The ink. The warning. I was the new voice whispering to whoever moved in next. I don't remember picking up the red pen, but somehow it was in my hand. I sat at the table, hands trembling, staring at the blank calendar, and I wrote, "Don't leave the apartment." They moved in 3 days later. A young couple, laughing as they carried boxes through the hallway. I watched through the peephole. They had no idea. No idea what waited for them in the walls, what watched them while they slept, what whispered when the calendar turned at midnight. They'll start hearing it soon. And the first time they ignore the warning, that's when I'll know. They're ready for the next message. I never thought a gym would be the place where things would start falling apart. Not mentally, not physically, and certainly not spiritually. I joined because I needed to change. Something simple. Clear my head, build a routine, maybe lose a little weight. What I got instead was a front row seat to something I still don't fully understand. It was a 24-hour gym tucked into a strip mall, the kind of place that didn't care about luxury or branding. No personal trainers, no smoothie bar, just machines. And mirrors and cheap, dirt cheap. That should have been the first red flag. The manager was this wiry guy with sunken cheeks and eyes that didn't blink enough. During the setup tour, he paused halfway through and turned to face me right, in front of the full-length mirrors that lined the weight section. "One rule here," he said. "Don't look into the mirrors. Use them to check form, fine. But don't stare into them. Don't linger." I smirked, half expecting him to crack a joke. He didn't. "Seriously," he said. "Check form. That's it." Nothing more. I nodded, more confused than concerned, and we finished the tour. I figured he was just eccentric, maybe had a thing against vanity. But that warning, those exact words kept echoing in my head. For the first few days, I didn't think much of it. I stuck to the machines, avoided eye contact with anyone, and got in and out as quickly as possible. I didn't use the mirrors much anyway. Maybe a glance to make sure I wasn't humiliating myself with terrible form, but that was about it. Still, the vibe inside that place was strange. People worked out in silence. No headphones, no grunting, no small talk. They moved like machines, avoiding eye contact, not just with each other, but with their own reflections. Every person there kept their backs or shoulders turned slightly, careful not to square up with the mirrors. They acted like touching eyes with themselves would do something they didn't want. I brushed it off. People are weird. Maybe there was a trend I didn't know about, some anti-reflection movement I'd missed. Whatever. But it got to me. On my 5th visit, something felt off. I'd just finished a short treadmill run and was walking over to the weights. The gym was quiet, only one or two people scattered across the floor. As I passed the long wall of mirrors, I caught my reflection. For a moment, I thought I noticed a delay, just a fraction of a second, like my head turned before the reflection. Caught up, I stopped and turned my head quickly again. Perfect sync. I frowned, took a deep breath, and told myself I was imagining things. Sleep deprivation, maybe. I was getting used to early mornings, and my body wasn't fully on board yet. But from that point on, I started paying attention. And once I did, I couldn't stop noticing it. The mirrors were wrong. Not obviously. They reflected the gym, the people, the machines. But every now and then, I'd catch someone's reflection pausing slightly too long, or the glass itself looking dimmer, like it wasn't fully reflecting light. A film of something between me and the other side. The worst part, no one ever looked at them, not directly. I thought it was just me until I started observing the regulars. They all kept their heads angled down or turned slightly away. Some would even reposition machines to avoid facing the mirrors at all. I should have left it alone. I should have just followed the rule and minded my business. But I didn't. One night, I stayed later than usual. The gym was practically empty. Just one guy on a rowing machine and me at the dumbbells. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. Everything was still. The hum of the lights and the clink of weights were the only sounds. I turned toward the mirror. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, maybe. Or something worse. I lifted my head and looked at myself. Really looked. There I was. Sweat dripping, chest heaving, arms slack at my sides. I reached for my towel and wiped my face. My reflection did the same. Then I bent down to grab my water bottle. My reflection didn't move. I froze. My pulse spiked as I slowly stood up. Again, the reflection was still bent over, still reaching for a water bottle that I'd already picked up. Its movement was slow, unnaturally smooth, like it was catching up on delay. Then it stood upright and stared at me, not matching my stance, not copying my posture, just watching. I took a slow step backward, and the reflection didn't follow. It smiled, not a grin, not a smirk. A thin, knowing curl of the lips, subtle, but unmistakably not mine. I looked away, heart thudding, then turned to the treadmill corner just to ground myself. But when I looked back, the reflection was normal again, matching me perfectly, too perfectly. That's when the realization hit. I wasn't seeing a reflection, not always. Sometimes. Something else was staring back, and it wasn't me. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept expecting to see something move in the dark corners of my apartment. I'd covered up the mirrors with sheets and towels, my bathroom mirror, my closet door, even the microwave's black reflective front. It felt ridiculous, but I didn't care. Every time I saw my own reflection now, it made my stomach turn. I told myself I was just stressed, paranoid. Maybe I'd hallucinated from exhaustion. It was easier to believe that than to consider what I actually thought had happened. By morning, the reflection had almost convinced me it wasn't real. I told myself I'd skip the gym for a few days, maybe a week, let it go. But by evening, I found myself walking there again, almost like I didn't have a choice. It was raining, sideways sheets of it, slamming the pavement, and the streets were mostly empty. A perfect storm for me to slip inside unnoticed. I figured I'd do a quick run, get out. The moment I stepped inside, I regretted it. The gym was dead silent. No music, no receptionist. Just the low thrum of overhead lights buzzing like flies. There were two people near the back on rowing machines, their heads down, focused, unmoving. The reflections in the glass wall across from them shimmered slightly, almost vibrating. I walked to the free weights section, keeping my eyes down. The long wall of mirrors was unavoidable, but I tried not to focus on it. Still, every time I moved, I could feel something watching. Like the air shifted, thickened, when my reflection should have been moving in sync. And then the lag started again. At first, it was subtle, my arm curling a dumbbell, the mirror catching up a half second late. But then I did a simple stretch, turning to one side. My reflection turned too, but not in the same direction. It twisted the wrong way, just slightly off, like it didn't know how my body worked. I froze. My heart thundered in my chest, but I forced myself not to look. I dropped the dumbbell and backed toward the locker room, refusing to glance at the mirror, but in my peripheral vision, I saw it. My reflection didn't drop the weight. It just stood there, grinning. In the locker room, I splashed water on my face and sat on the bench, hands shaking. What the hell was happening? Was it some kind of hallucination? A trick mirror? A mental break? I needed answers. And the manager there. Creepy, hollow-eyed guy who warned me he must have known something. Why else would he give such a specific rule? I decided I'd ask him. Confront him if I had to. But he wasn't at the front desk when I left the locker room. In fact, the front desk was empty. The lights were still on, the computer still humming, but no one was there. I stepped behind the counter, calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" No response. Just that buzzing hum and the quiet screech of rain outside the glass doors. Then I heard it, a whisper, barely audible. It came from the far end of the gym, near the maintenance hallway I'd never noticed before. The door there was open slightly, just enough to let a sliver of darkness leak into the fluorescent light. The whisper came again like a breath, hissing through clenched teeth. Don't. Look. I backed away, pulse skyrocketing, every instinct telling me to leave. But I didn't. God help me. I needed to know. So I stepped toward the hallway. The air grew colder with every footstep. The overhead lights dimmed slightly, flickering like they were struggling to stay alive. My footsteps echoed, louder than they should have. As I reached the door, I paused, took a deep breath, and looked inside. A long, narrow corridor stretched into blackness. It wasn't part of the public gym area. The walls were bare cement, damp and unfinished. A single mirror hung crookedly on the left wall, mottled, with a crack running diagonally across. The whisper came again, "Turn back." But I didn't. I stepped inside and faced the mirror. At first, I couldn't see anything. My own face was too dark, blurred by the filmy glass. Then the fog on the surface began to clear, only it wasn't from the mirror. It was from inside. My reflection came into focus. Except it wasn't standing like me. It was hunched, twisted, its face stretched too long, jaw slightly unhinged. Its eyes stared directly into mine, not blinking, not moving. It didn't mimic me. It observed me. And then, slowly, its mouth began to move. But it wasn't saying words. It was mouthing something else, over and over, the lips forming silent, jagged patterns that didn't resemble any language I knew. I stepped back. It didn't. It kept moving forward, closer, until its face was pressed against the other side. Of the glass distorted, snarling silently. Then it pounded the glass from the inside. I turned and bolted, the sound of cracking echoing behind me like ice fracturing underfoot. I ran past the machines, past the empty front desk, and burst through the gym doors into the rain. I didn't stop until I was home. Once again, I covered every mirror in my apartment, every single one. But when I passed by the sheet covering my bathroom mirror, I swear I saw a shadow shift behind the fabric, and it wasn't mine. I didn't go outside for 2 days. My apartment became a bunker. Every reflective surface was covered, mirrors, black screens, polished metal. Even the toaster. I barely ate, barely slept. I kept the lights dim and the curtains closed, and still I felt them. The reflections, watching. It wasn't just the gym anymore. It had followed me home. The thing inside the mirror in that hallway wasn't just an echo. It knew I'd seen it, and now it wanted me to see more. I could feel it scratching at the other side of the glass, trying to get back in. On the third night, I heard a sound from the bathroom, a soft creaking, like the slow bending of a wooden beam under pressure. I hadn't gone in there since I got back. The mirror was covered, but the sound pulled at me like a whisper. I crept down the hall, heart pounding, every footstep like a hammer blow in the silence. I stopped just outside the door. The air was thick, humid, like someone had run a hot shower for too long. But no one had. I reached forward and touched the handle. It was ice cold. I pushed it open slowly. The bathroom light flickered once, then steadied. And the sheet I'd hung over the mirror, it was on the floor. The mirror was exposed, fogged slightly, but I could still see my reflection staring back. My heart leapt into my throat. For a long moment, we just stood there, facing each other. Me and my not me. It looked like me. But it didn't feel like me. Its eyes were slightly too wide. Its posture just subtly off. Like it was mimicking how a human should stand. Then, without warning, it tilted its head, just like it did back at the gym. I slammed the door and stumbled backward, falling hard against the hallway wall. My hands were shaking, breath ragged. My reflection had moved again, without me. This was real. It wasn't paranoia, it wasn't stress. Something was trying to cross over. That night, I slept in the living room with a knife under my pillow, but sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, my face twisted, grinning, its hand pressed against the inside of the glass. In the morning, I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the gym. I know how stupid that sounds, but I needed to know what this was. I needed answers, and the only person who might have them was the manager. He wasn't at the front again. No one was. I checked the office behind the desk. Empty. I wandered through the gym floor, scanning for anyone, but the place was dead. Machines humming. Fluorescent lights buzzing. Mirrors stretching across the walls like glass portals. Each one watched me with my own eyes, until I noticed something different. The mirror in the stretching area, the one near the corner, had a crack running through it. Not like someone had hit it, more like it had split from inside. And behind the crack, the reflection was wrong. The room was empty around me, but in the mirror I wasn't alone. A second figure stood just behind my shoulder, blurry and pale. I spun around. Nothing. I turned back to the mirror. The figure was closer now. Its shape was humanoid, but distorted like a man carved from smoke and static. Its head was bent at an unnatural angle. Long arms hung at its sides like dead branches. It didn't move, but its reflection did. The real room remained empty, but in the mirror, the figure took a step forward. Then another, and another, until it was nearly pressing up against the glass, staring directly into my soul with two hollow pits for eyes. I couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the floor, my body paralyzed with primal terror. My reflection stood there, pale and frozen, just like me, and then it blinked. Not me, it blinked. The lights overhead flickered violently. Somewhere deep inside the gym, a metal bar clanged to the ground. The figure's mouth opened slowly in the glass, wide and black and impossibly deep. The sound that followed wasn't a growl. It was a scream, but it came from inside my own head. A shrieking, static-laced howl that rattled through my skull like 1,000 broken radios. My hands clamped over my ears, and I dropped to my knees, sobbing, begging it to stop. And then silence. When I opened my eyes, the figure was gone. The mirror was empty again, but my reflection, it wasn't crying. It stood there, calm, cold, grinning just slightly. I stumbled out of the gym, shaking, barely able to walk. Straight, I didn't go home. I checked into a motel across town and locked myself inside. I covered the bathroom mirror with a blanket. I slept on the floor. But that night, as I lay in the dark, I saw a movement in the black screen of the TV. Across from me, a pale shape, watching. I barely remember falling asleep, but I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. The motel room was silent, too silent. I sat up and stared at the covered TV screen. The blanket I'd thrown over it was still in place. But the air felt wrong, heavier, thicker, like I wasn't alone. I reached for my phone. The screen was dark, dead, no battery, even though it had been charging all night. I tried the light switch, nothing. Power was out. That's when I noticed it. The mirror above the motel's bathroom sink was uncovered. I knew I'd thrown a towel over it. The second I arrived, I remembered doing it. But now it was bare, gleaming slightly in the low ambient light from the window. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed, terrified, just like I was. I stood up slowly, every instinct in my body telling me to run, but I didn't. I walked toward the mirror, barefoot, shaking. My reflection moved with me in sync until I stopped. And it kept walking, straight toward the inside of the mirror. I gasped and stumbled back. The glass rippled like water again, just like at the gym. But this time, the thing inside didn't look like me anymore. It had my shape, but its skin was too smooth like wax, stretched tight over bone. Its mouth hung open in a permanent grin, teeth too white, too even, and its eyes, no pupils. Just milky orbs, twitching in every direction at once. It placed one hand on the inside of the glass and pushed. The surface bulged outward. I grabbed my bag and bolted from the room, not stopping to put on shoes. I sprinted down the motel hallway, pounding on the manager's office door until someone finally answered. It was an older man, maybe in his 70s, half asleep, wearing a bathrobe and slippers. "You all right, son?" he asked. "There's something in my mirror," I gasped. "In room 12, something's in there. It's trying to get out." He blinked slowly, then let out a quiet sigh. "You looked, didn't you?" he said. My blood ran cold. "What?" "The mirrors," he muttered. "You looked?" "They always find the ones who look too long." I stared at him, trembling. He opened a drawer behind the counter and pulled out a yellowed pamphlet, folded, creased, barely held together. He handed it to me without another word. Inside was a map, not of the motel, but of the city. More specifically, locations. All of them marked with a red X. Gyms, dance studios, hotel bathrooms, antique stores, places with mirrors. The pamphlet's title was scrawled across in handwritten ink. "They live behind the glass." "Who made this?" I whispered. The man's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw real fear in them. "My brother." He disappeared in 1986, last seen staring into the mirror at a gym on Lincoln Street. The same gym I joined. He said they were reflections that didn't want to be reflections anymore, the manager went on. Said they could learn how to mimic us better, how to crawl through the cracks. I thought he'd gone mad. "But you believe him now," I said quietly. "I do," he nodded. "Because I've seen them too." I left the motel before the sun rose, the pamphlet clutched in my hand. There were too many marks on that map, too many stories, too many warnings. I knew then I wasn't dealing with a ghost. Or a hallucination. This was something else. Something older. Something everywhere. The glass wasn't a barrier. It was a door. And I had opened it. I drove for hours, avoiding freeways, skipping gas stations with bathroom mirrors, even ripping off the rearview one in a moment of panic. Every reflective surface felt like a trap. I couldn't risk it, not after what I'd seen. But the problem wasn't just the mirrors anymore. It was me. I hadn't noticed it right away. But it started on the third day after I fled the motel. Subtle things at first. My voice sounded different. Not higher or lower. Just off. Like an echo of itself. My shadow sometimes moved when I didn't. In the corner of my eye, I'd see myself blink too late. A half-second behind. Like something was trying to sync with me and failing. I found a secluded cabin rental online. No mirrors, no TVs, no glass in the cabinets. Just wood, dust, and isolation. That's what I needed. To hide. To figure out what was happening to me. I covered my phone screen with duct tape. Threw my laptop in a creek. Anything that could reflect gone. The first night there, I dreamed of glass shattering. The second, I dreamed of walking down an endless hallway, lined on both sides with mirrors. Only none of the reflections were mine. Each one showed someone else dead-eyed, grinning, frozen in time. And on the third night, I didn't dream. I woke up with bloody fingernails and a shattered mirror shard in my hand. The shard had come from the bathroom cabinet. A cabinet checked 3 times before arriving, one with no glass. One I'd deliberately chosen this place for. But there it was, broken, jagged, staring up at me. And the worst part, the reflection in the shard was smiling. But I wasn't. I screamed and hurled it into the fireplace, watching the warped image melt in the heat. But even then, I felt it. Something watching, something waiting. I didn't sleep again after that. I started writing, documenting everything. Every sound, every shadow, every moment my reflection didn't quite match my movements. I began to wonder, what if the thing in the mirror hadn't fully crossed over? What if it had only started? Was it trying to replace me or become me? But how you fight something that is you. By the end of the week, the lines were blurring. I'd talk and hear a faint echo, like someone repeating my words a second later. I'd move and catch myself lagging in the window's reflection, even. After I'd covered it, even without light, the outline was still visible. That's when I realized it wasn't trying to mimic me anymore. It was teaching me how to mimic it. I wasn't being haunted. I was being reshaped. I stared into a bowl of water that night. My only remaining reflective surface. I needed to see what I had become. My face stared back, but it wasn't mine. The grin was too wide, the eyes too still. The thing in the reflection whispered, "Almost ready." I smashed the bowl. The water splashed across the floor, and the shard of porcelain sliced my palm open. But I didn't care. I didn't feel it, not really. Not like I should have. The pain felt muted, distant, like it belonged to someone else. That's when I knew. It wasn't just watching me anymore. It was inside me. The reflection, my other self, had been crawling its way into my skin, day by day, gesture by gesture. And I had let it, I had looked, I had stared, and that had been enough. I wanted to believe I still had time, that I could fight it off, push it back, get help. But even my thoughts felt strange now. The voice narrating them didn't feel like my own. When I blinked, it felt rehearsed, artificial, like I was mimicking something pretending to be human. I left the cabin before dawn, wrapping my bleeding hand in a shirt. I didn't take anything, just my car keys and a single thought looping over and over. I have to go back. Back to the gym. If that's where it started, if that's where it came from, then maybe that's where it could end it. Or maybe I was just returning to where it belonged now. The gym was closed when I arrived. Of course it was. The windows were dark, the glass, panels dim and cold, but I knew how to get in. A side door the staff used during odd hours, with a busted lock I'd noticed weeks ago. I slipped inside. It was just like before, quiet, still humming faintly with electricity. The mirrors lined the walls like watchful eyes, stretching out in endless rows, waiting. I walked slowly to the center of the weight room. My steps echoed, loud and sharp, as though the gym itself was holding its breath. Then I saw it. My reflection was already there. Standing inside the mirror, smiling. It didn't mimic me. It didn't need to anymore, because I wasn't the original. I stepped closer to the glass. The thing in the mirror matched my every move, but not like before. It wasn't copying. It was leading. I moved because it did. My hand reached out. Not by my choice. The mirror rippled at my touch like liquid mercury, and the thing on the other side placed its palm against mine. We were the same now. And in that moment, it whispered, "Done." The ripple stopped, and the reflection walked away. I stood frozen, staring into the mirror as I realized something horrifying. I had no reflection anymore. The part of me that was me was gone. It had taken my place. I don't know what walked out of that gym afterward, but I know it looked like me, talked like me, probably went back to my apartment, picked up my life, smiled at my friends, laughed at their jokes. Maybe it's still out there, living my life better than I ever did. And me? I don't know where I am now. Sometimes I see glimpses of light, flickers of movement through fractured glass, reflections in strangers' eyes, car windows, puddles after the rain. I scream. Number. One hears me, because I'm trapped now behind the mirror, and someone else is living my life. So if you ever see your reflection hesitate, even for just a second run, because once it starts, it doesn't stop, and you'll never get out.